I used to think unfinished places were harmless, just projects that ran out of money or patience. But the tower I inherited wasn't incomplete. It was interrupted, like a sentence with its last word swallowed by a scream. The first night I stepped inside, a wind rose from the center of the spiral stairs, even though every window was boarded. The air smelled like wet limestone and something coppery, like a cut that never closes. A single nail lay in the dust, still warm when I touched it, as if someone had just hammered it and then vanished mid-swing. When I looked up the hollow shaft, I didn't see darkness. I saw open mouths, levels without floors, rooms without walls, stacked like jaws ready to bite down if I dared climb. If stories like this keep you up at night, hit subscribe. You'll want to hear how the tower tried to finish me. I inherited the tower from a great-uncle I barely remembered. Hiram Coates, bachelor, builder of oddities. In family photos, he stood apart from everyone, thin as a nail and twice as unforgiving. The will named the structure only as the West Head Folly, Lot 47, but the solicitor called it by what people whispered, the never finished. It rose from a granite headland where the sea broke itself into teeth, a cylinder of grey stone capped by nothing. No roof, no crenellations, just the wet sky like a lid that never fit. A ring of scaffolding fossilized around its upper third, seized by rust so thick it looked like dried blood. The door, a heavy iron slab, hung askew on a bolt that shouldn't have held it but did. The padlock had been cut. Not by me. Inside, the tower was a spine. Every landing was a vertebra of stone ribs and cold alcoves. There were marks along the inner wall at regular heights, short gouges, 3 at a time, like someone had braced a ladder there, climbed, moved it, climbed again, all the way up. When I pressed my hand to the stone, I felt a pulse. Not mine. I came with practical intentions. Assess, plan, sell. Debts had teeth, and I was tired of being chewed. I brought a contractor's flashlight, a notebook, and the half-confidence of someone who thinks paperwork can tame old buildings. My phone lost signal halfway up the path, and I remember the exact moment the last bar died. A gull screamed, and in the silence after, the tower listened. There were artifacts. A tin lunch pail left open on a windowsill that looked east, bread petrified into a fossil curl, an apple with its skin long gone but the core intact, bleached like bone. A carpenter's pencil wore down to the metal cap. A coil of twine had fused to itself with salt. In the dust, I found a set of boot prints that started near the door and went halfway around the inner curve before they stopped abruptly at nothing, as if the rest of the tower had once been there, and then thought better of it. At the second landing, a single wooden plank bridged a gap to what might have become a room. It bounced once under my boot and settled, complaining in a low, damp tongue. On the far wall, Hiram had chalked a date, November 12th, no year. Beneath it he had written, "A line must hold, I was not alone." The first sign was not a sound, but a change of pressure. The air tightened, like a crowded elevator before the doors close. My flashlight beam thinned, dust lifted in coordinated spirals, as if stirred by hands I could not see. I spoke out of habit, the way you do to stray dogs and empty houses. "Hello?" The tower answered with absence. I turned to retreat and caught my reflection, no, my shape, in a sheet of water pooled on the stone lip of the stair. The surface trembled and didn't settle. My outline flickered, grew taller, then too thin, then bristled with a scaffolding of shadow, as if the tower tried me on to see if I would fit. I should have left then. Instead, I looked up again. There are moments you don't remember deciding. You just find yourself doing. My foot lifted to the next step, my hand met the cold iron of the central rail, and the tower's draft flowed down like a slow exhale over my face. Tasting me, halfway to the third landing, I heard it, a hammering from above. Tap, 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 not random. A rhythm, measured, waiting. The sound a worker makes when checking if a line is true. Is someone there? I called. The hammering stopped. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It leaned. Then a reply came, but not in words. From the dark above, something fell through the hollow, a single nail, bright, clean, new. It struck the step beside my boot and stood upright. Quivering, I bent to pick it up, warm again, and saw, reflected in its tiny, polished head, a face that wasn't mine, looking down over my shoulder. I didn't turn around, because the breath against my ear turned cold, and a voice said, "You're late. Hold the line." The voice at my ear was neither whisper nor shout. It had the flat authority of a foreman, who said the same instruction 1,000 times, "Hold the line." I turned too late. The stair behind me was empty, an absence so complete it felt deliberate. The nail in my hand cooled to the exact temperature of the air, as if refusing to prove itself alive on my behalf. I told myself the rational things. Old stone carries sound. Gulls can mimic. Drafts speak in cracks. Then I remembered the date chalked on the landing, November 12th, and something more, my father's birthday. A coincidence that lodged like grit behind the eye. "Okay," I said to no one. "I'm going up." The third landing was a raw ring of stone with 3 open mouths where rooms should have been. A sagging rope hung from a ceiling bolt, ending in a frayed noose of fibers, as if a pulley had been cut free mid-haul. The dust here was thinner, swept into arcs that suggested recent work. In one corner, a mason's line, bright yellow, stretched taut between 2 iron spikes bisecting the ring. It thrummed faintly like a plucked string you can feel. "Not here," I crouched. The line was fresh, unworn, clean, but when I pinched it, I felt a subtle resistance, as if something beyond the line held it from the other side. I traced its path. On the floor, chalk numbers marched in a curve. 18, 19, 20, pause, then 22, 23, note 21. The missing measure. Hiram? I said it softly, surprised that I'd used his name. It tasted odd in the mouth, like an oath you weren't raised to swear. A gust knifed up the stairwell, and the line vibrated harder. The tower seemed to breathe around it. I set the nail down beside the chalk marks, aligning it with the Phantom 21, and watched. For a second, nothing happened. Then the line stopped trembling. The air eased. The stone's low pressure, its elevator crowd closeness, released by a notch. "Is that what you wanted?" I said, and felt foolish at once. A clink answered me, tiny, precise. It came from the center void. I edged to the balustrade and angled my flashlight into the hollow spine. For 4 floors above, the light cut cleanly. Then it fractured, as if striking something that wasn't there, and failed. In the black, something flashed back, the way a cat's eye does in a hedgerow. A circle no bigger than a coin. It winked, shifted, disappeared. I didn't like the idea of someone else in my tower. Possession is a stubborn thing, and besides, fear hates competition. I called down instead of up, testing the acoustics. "If you're squatting, make yourself known. I'll have the place surveyed in a week." The tower did not appreciate my tone. A dull boom rolled through the masonry, like a fist hitting a door from far away. The rope twitched. Dust fell in a glittering veil. My phone, dead of signal, still had its flashlight as a backup. I set it on the stone to cast a low, steady glow while I explored the mouths of the half-rooms. In the western aperture, propped against the wall, I found a ledger, cloth-bound, warped by damp, the word "tally" ghosting its cover. Inside, columns of figures sloped like tired trees. Names appeared in pencil along the margins, written sideways: P. Mallory, line; D. Hales, line; B. Corbett, line. A pattern. Scores ticked off in 5s. On the last page anyone had touched, there were just 2 letters, where the name should be H.C. Beneath them, a sentence in a neater hand than the numbers: "Where a line is broken, a life closes the gap." I closed the ledger carefully, as if it might bleed. The tower had not been abandoned, not really. It had been accounting. My father used to say, every project eats something: money, hours, marriages, until it's full. Maybe this one ate people. The thought should have made me leave. Instead, I felt a mean little spark of practicality. If the tower's myth was this thick, a developer would pay to turn it into an attraction. "Sell the story with the stone," my brain whispered. "Debt first. Ghosts later." I slipped the ledger into my backpack and returned to the taut line. The missing 21 needled me. I measured with my boot. The chalk spacing was a laborer's stride, not a surveyor's. 18, 19, 20, gap, 22. I stood where 21 should be. The rope trembled. The air retightened. A hum rose from the stone, low enough to feel in the teeth. "All right," I said, ridiculous and stubborn. "I'll hold it." I pressed the heel of my hand into the invisible space, as if bracing a plank that wasn't there. The line sang once, so faint I doubted it. Then from above the measured tapping resumed. Tap, 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 tap. This time it was closer. The rhythm changed, call and answer. I kept my hand steady. "Good," said the foreman's voice at my shoulder, closer than before, breath cold again. "Now don't move." "Who are you?" I asked, eyes on the line. "Same as you," he said. The one who came next. A weight settled against my palm, gradual, implacable. The line's strain climbed into a thin whine. My fingers started to shake. Sweat ran down my wrist and the stone drank it. "I can't," I began. "Hold," the voice said. "No malice, only command." "Until the splice." A shape leaned over the central void, a silhouette framed against the thin light from the boarded slits above. I saw no features, only the geometry of a man who knew scaffolding the way a sailor knows rope. He lifted an arm. Metal glinted. The weight on my hand suddenly doubled. The humming sharpened into a headache. Something somewhere slid into place with a sound like a blade finding its sheath. "Splice!" The silhouette barked. The line snapped. Not broke, snapped tight, and the force yanked my hand forward into empty air. I pitched toward the void, knees buckling, backpack dragging me off balance. The rope whipped past my shoulder with a hiss. As I windmilled for the rail, a second hand, ice-cold, calloused, clamped my wrist from behind and pulled. A voice at my ear said, softer now, almost relieved, "Good, now you can take his place." The hand that seized my wrist felt like wet iron left overnight in frost. Reflex yanked me backward. I hit the inner wall and slid until my boots bit stone. The mason's line that had snapped tight sang itself down to silence. "I've got it," the voice said, releasing me as if handing my arm back. "You hold it till the splice. Then you go where the break used to be. My place." I rubbed warmth into my fingers. "What place?" The silhouette leaned over the central void. In the thin shaft of light, I saw a wide canvas belt with a metal ring cinched around a man who wasn't quite there. "The gap," he said. 19, 20, missing. He nodded at the chalk marks where I had stood. "Someone holds until someone splices. Always a man to the measure. Who splices?" "The one above." "He works the join. You hold the line, and when the join is done?" His glance cut to the ledger peeking from my backpack. "Then you go into the tally." "I'm not going into anything," I said. "This place is mine." The air tasted ordinary, salt and lime instead of copper. I forced the rational picture. Failed winch, men acting as clamps while mortar set, bodies used as braces because money ran out. "Name," I said, to nail him to specifics. "Mallory, Philip, line." The words fell like nails into a tin. Corbett's foreman above. And before me was Splice. He fell. We put him in the numbers. The ledger's margins matched his cadence. P. Mallory, line. D. Hales, line. B. Corbett, line. The book didn't track timber. It counted men assigned to a task that never finished. "How long?" "Long enough to know the sea eats what we raise," he said. "Long enough for the date to rub to a notch." "November 12th, I said. "That was the last day we had a roof." Clouds came through it like smoke. Measured tapping resumed above. Tap. "Tap, tap, tap. I can brace this," I said. "Steel ribs, temporary floors. Steel rusts faster here." "Salt finds it. I'll bring a crew." "We're a crew," he said, and I heard my father. "Every project eats something." November 12th, my father's birthday, stuck like grit. "Did you know Hiram Coates?" I asked. "HC." "He wrote the rules," Mallory said. "Said a line must hold or the whole thing sags and kills us all." "He left when the roof failed." A pause. "He didn't come back." The tapping above changed. 3 quick strokes, a drag, 2 more. Mallory cocked his head. "Brace. We're taking load from the north slit." A fine thread showed where my flashlight hadn't admitted it. Fresh nylon stretched from spike to spike, then climbing into dark under tension. Where it passed my shoulder, the air went cold. "What do I do?" "Stand on 21, he said. Palms flat. "Hold your breath when the wind comes. Don't speak when the join goes in." "Why?" "If you speak, the tower thinks the gap is your mouth and fills it." "With what?" Stone. The wind arrived, a shove like a hallway being shut. The thread bit my palms through nothingness, a phantom plank pushing back. The rope whined. Hammer blows above merged into a steady run. I held my breath. The bright hair of the line and the black of the shaft were all that remained. Somewhere something clicked into place. Pressure vanished. The line slackened. Silence tasted like relief, I exhaled. Mallory's belt ring loosened around absence, as if some knot weight had relaxed. For a heartbeat, I believed I'd solved a practical problem with a practical brace and a practical ghost of a crew. My dead phone buzzed. New voicemail. Timestamp November 12th, 12:21 p.m. Today. Caller, Dad. I hadn't dialed that number since the funeral. My thumb hovered. Don't, Mallory said. Not here. I pressed play. My father's voice filled the hollow, wet with sea. Son, hold the line until I... The message cut off with a hiss, as if submerged. November 12th, 12:21. The missing 21 on the chalk. I looked up. The belt ring turned slowly in air where a body should be. Mallory was gone. High above, something coin-bright winked. The thread at my shoulder tightened again, unasked. Hold, said a voice that was not Mallory's, older, closer. The splice is late. Cold breath feathered my neck. A second line I hadn't seen slid across my back and cinched like a harness. I stepped, was drawn onto the chalk 21 as the tower inhaled. The floor under my boots moved, not down but in, as if the tower were closing the gap with me inside it. The stone did not crumble, it folded. Every instinct screamed that floors don't behave like lungs, but the slab beneath my boots pressed inward, drawing me toward the tower's hollow spine. The chalk mark 21 smeared beneath my heel. I threw my weight backward and hit the wall, except it wasn't the same wall anymore. The curvature had tightened, closing the circle by inches. I shoved my shoulder into the stone. It yielded like cartilage, then hardened again. Mallory, I yelled. If you're still here, the tower exhaled. Cold air burst from the void and extinguished my flashlight. Darkness flowed in like liquid metal. For a moment I saw nothing, only heard the soft creak, creak, creak of rope sliding through pulleys overhead. Then a dim glow bled from the mortar seams themselves, a slow orange pulse, as if the tower had veins. Every pulse beat once with my heart. Until it didn't. The rhythm shifted, leading me. I realized it wasn't echoing me anymore. It was teaching me how to keep time. I clawed for my phone, the only light left. The screen blinked alive, showing a map with no signal and a single notification, still glowing from the voicemail. But the timestamp had changed. Now it read November 12th, 21:12, 9:12 p.m., exactly 9 hours ahead of when I'd first entered. How long have I been here? I whispered. The tower replied in sound. Tap, 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 tap. Same rhythm, but lower now, like it came from beneath the foundation. I moved toward the stairwell, testing each step before trusting it. The spiral descended farther than I remembered, swallowing the light in thicker coils. The air warmed and smelled of wet ash. When my phone's glow caught a surface, I saw carved letters in the mortar, one set per step. Chiseled by hand, hold the line over and over. Then a new word appeared halfway down, pass, and below that, tally. The steps ended in a chamber I hadn't known existed. The walls were smooth limestone, streaked with rust that wasn't rust at all. It was dried blood, patterned in arcs like pendulums had swung there. In the center stood a wooden frame, shaped like a door without a wall, hung with dozens of ropes leading upward into blackness. Nails jutted from its beams, bright and recent. My earlier nail, the one that had fallen beside my boot, lay among them upright as if waiting. Something moved behind the frame. Not footsteps, breathing. Who's there? Same as you, said Mallory's voice, but thinner now, like he spoke through cloth. Lines cut again. We need the measure. I don't understand. What is this place? The joiner's floor. His outline flickered inside the frame, translucent, wearing the belt with its empty ring. Every man holds the weight until someone new takes it. Then the tower adds a course. We're near the roof now. There is no roof. Not yet, he said, and raised one spectral hand toward the ropes. But it will finish tonight. The ropes twitched. Dust sifted from above like snowfall. The frame's top beam groaned. Don't touch that, I said. It's unstable. Mallory's smile was a shadow bending wrong. It's been unstable for 130 years. Then he looked at me, really looked, and his eyes reflected light that wasn't mine. You shouldn't have come on the 12th. What happens on the 12th? The splice, he said simply. Every 12-12, the line closes another gap. The ropes yanked tight all at once, singing with tension. The sound wasn't physical. It vibrated behind the eyes. My nose started to bleed. Mallory reached through the frame, palm open. Hold it, he said. No, you already are. I looked down. The harness that had cinched my torso earlier was gone, but faint welts crossed my chest in its exact shape, glowing dull orange like heated wire. The ropes on the frame mirrored the pattern, moving when I breathed. I backed away, shaking my head. I'm leaving. Mallory's expression collapsed into pity. The door's gone. I turned. He was right. The stairwell had sealed behind me, stone where air had been. Only the glowing mortar lines remained, converging toward the frame, like veins toward a heart. The tower's pulse quickened. Each throb came with a whisper of mortar cracking above. Through the ropes, faint light leaked from the floors higher up, daylight, though night ruled outside. Hold, Mallory said again, voice fading as if carried by wind through unfinished rooms. If you let go now, the tower will start again from the foundation. The ropes jerked. The frame leaned toward me like a throat preparing to swallow. When I lifted my hands to push it away, every rope mirrored the gesture, rising too, and the whole frame answered in my own voice, hold the line. The frame breathed with me. Each rise of my chest lifted the ropes. Each exhale let them sink, threads of a lung stitched out of hempen stubbornness. The glow in the mortar softened from orange to a steadier amber, like the tower had decided my pulse would do for now. Coherencia, I muttered. Coherence. Forcing order onto madness. If I could understand the system, maybe I could break it. I slipped the ledger from my backpack and balanced it on a stone ledge. The cloth crackled like dry leaves. I turned past the columns of line and tally until I reached the center seam. 2 pages that didn't want to part. Mold had glued them together in a grey kiss. I teased the edge with my fingernail. The tower shivered around me, ropes rustling like tall grass in a wind. When the pages came free, a scrap fell out, oilskin, folded small. Inside, a photograph the size of a cigarette card. 3 men on scaffolding, a 4th half out of frame, all turned toward the camera with the solemn smirk workers wear when they pretend not to be proud. One of them was Hiram, thin as a nail, eyes like rule marks. Another was Mallory, younger, flesh instead of breath. And the half-face at the edge, my throat closed. It was my father's mouth and cheek, younger by decades, but the scar on the corner of his lip, where a stray board had clipped him when I was a child, was the same. I had never known him to set foot on this coast. The date scrawled on the back in pencil, Nova 12, no year. Below it, in a different hand, the warning I'd already seen in chalk. A line must hold. You knew him, I said to the air. Mallory's voice answered from the frame, thinner than before. We know everyone who holds. Did he? Did he finish something here? The join never finishes, Mallory said. It moves. I tucked the photo into my pocket like it might warm there and turned the ledger's next leaf. The handwriting shifted, tidier, cramped. Hiram's, I guessed. Not numbers now, but short entries that read like orders and prayers. The sea eats iron. Will use men. Where mortar fails, flesh will not, so long as the flesh believes it must. When the roof is on, the storm will have to go around us. The tower will teach the weather a rule. Teach the weather a rule, I repeated, incredulous. You can't legislate a storm. Storms are lines too, Mallory murmured. Pressure finds a gap. Another entry. On the 12th at 12 the line affirms. Hold until it does not need you. If it needs you again, you didn't hold long enough. The last sentence had been pressed so hard, the nib cut fiber. A blot followed, shaped like a small, perfect eye. I flipped to the book's final written page. Beneath the last tally, a space remained, blank but for faint indentations, as if someone had written there and then peeled the words away. My phone's light grazed the grooves. Letters surfaced like bones under thin skin, Coates, and then my name, first and last, spelled right. Today's date followed in a ghost of pencil. 12/11, Splice. I pressed my thumb to the indentation. The paper warmed. Ink bled up from nowhere, blackening my name stroke by stroke. I jerked my hand back. "Don't be afraid of being true," Mallory said gently. "Only be afraid of letting go." "Why me?" I asked. "Why my father?" "You're good at holding," he said simply. "Debt promises breath. Some families train their wrists without knowing." Something thumped above, then skittered across the ceiling like a small animal dragging a chain. Dust sifted down. The ropes in the frame tightened a hair, aligning themselves into a pattern that matched the faint welts across my chest, over the sternum, under the ribs, crossing at the heart. I looked up into the shaft. Through the boarded slits, night had gathered, but in the seams where stone met stone, a cold daylight leaked, the wrong hour, the wrong season. It fell in narrow ladders. For a second, I saw shadowed men moving on those ladders, heads bowed, each bearing not a beam but a name across their shoulders. When they passed, the ladders were empty again. Coherence, I told myself again, louder. There's a mechanism. I traced the frame. Uprights mortised to a base plate, top beam pinned by pegs, pulleys likely catching a hidden counterweight. If I cut the right rope, perhaps the tension would bleed. Perhaps the tower would slump instead of close. "Don't cut," Mallory said. "It restarts lower." "How low?" He didn't answer. The ropes thrummed in a sympathetic chord. In the ledger, the lines of numbers crawled slightly, not moving but aligning, as if the book itself wanted to square. My dead phone buzzed again. New voicemail. The same caller ID, Dad. Timestamp 2121. I lifted it, hand shaking. The stone around me held its breath. His voice came thin, as if recorded on wire and played underwater. "Son, hold the line until I—" A pause. A second voice, not my father's, cut in close and dry. "Until we pass." "Dad?" My voice cracked on the second letter. Static swelled. Through it I heard hammering, tap, 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 in perfect time with the rope's pulse. Then a third voice joined, right beside my ear, the foreman's authority softened by fatigue. "Bring him up." The frame shuddered. Ropes climbed of their own accord, winding themselves around invisible pulleys, and the top beam rose like a drawbridge. The sealed wall behind me opened, not by cracking, but by aligning. Stones sliding fractionally until a narrow stair showed, one I had never seen when I descended. Light leaked from above. A thin, salt-white glow, coherence, I whispered for the last time, and didn't believe it. On the first step of the revealed stair, a fresh chalk mark waited 22, and above it, in a neat, familiar hand, my father had written, "Hold for me." The new stair was narrower than the rest, stone polished smooth by something other than hands or time. Each step hummed faintly, a vibration I felt in the arches of my feet more than I heard. When I reached the first landing, the chalk mark 22 glowed like a live ember. The tower's pulse followed me upward, slow but steady, as if its heart had decided to sync with mine. The air grew cleaner, sharper, no salt, no dust, just the mineral tang of new-cut rock. I hadn't realized how stale the lower levels had been until I tasted freshness again. It should have been comforting, it wasn't. Fresh air implied opening, and the tower was supposed to be sealed. I lifted my phone. No signal. Only the dim reflection of my face in the black glass, cheeks drawn, eyes bruised by hours of torchlight. For a second, the reflection smiled back before I did. The stair curved into a circular room wider than any below. The ceiling was unfinished timber, thick beams running like ribs across an exposed sky. In the middle stood a workbench layered, with old blueprints, each one pinned by a single nail driven through its center. The paper had yellowed to parchment, but the ink was alive, crawling faintly, rearranging its lines whenever I blinked. A lantern sat beside the papers, still burning, a modern camping lantern, bright and clean. Next to it, a thermos and a half-eaten sandwich wrapped in wax paper. Someone else was here, I called out, voice echoing in spirals. "Hello? I'm not here to trespass, don't cross the marks," a voice said from behind a beam. I froze. The speaker stepped forward. A man in his 50s, jacket smeared with plaster, flashlight hanging from a lanyard around his neck. His face looked as exhausted as the tower itself, creases carved deep, stubble gone white. "I thought this place was condemned," I said. "It is," he answered. "Condemned to finish itself." "Who are you?" "Owner, technically." I tried a weak smile. "Inherited it," his eyes narrowed. "Your Coates' blood. Great-uncle Hiram? Yeah." He shook his head slowly. "Not Hiram. The next one. You have his eyes." It took me a moment. "You knew my father?" "Knew what was left of him." The man motioned toward the workbench. He tried to finish the roof, said he could seal it from the storm, but the storm's inside. He walked with a limp, favoring one knee. When he passed the lantern, its flame leaned toward him, drawn like grass to wind. "You shouldn't have come today." I glanced at the plans. The top sheet bore a spiral like the tower's own staircase, but it never ended. It just kept turning inward, a maze that folded back on itself. In the corner was a single notation in fresh pencil, 21, splice complete. "Who drew that?" I asked. He looked down. "Not me." "What's your name?" "Doesn't matter." He nodded toward the ceiling. "You hear them yet?" At first, nothing. Then, a low shuffle above, like heavy boots pacing back and forth. I angled the flashlight upward. Between the beams, gaps of darkness moved, and now and then a glint of metal as if nails slid in and out of wood on their own. "They've been walking for hours," the man said. "Each year the same. It's the tower's birthday." I remembered the chalk, November 12th, the ledger, my father's handwriting. "Where does it end?" He smiled without humor. "You'll find out when it starts again." The ceiling groaned. Dust sifted down like snow. He grabbed my wrist suddenly and pressed something into my palm, a cold iron nail, bright and new. "Keep it," he said. "When the hammering stops, drive it through the floor." "Why?" "So it knows you're not leaving." Before I could ask more, the lantern flared white. When my sight cleared, the man was gone. Only his thermos remained, still warm to the touch. The footsteps above had stopped. Silence fell, heavier than the stone itself. Then one single tap echoed from below, where I had come from, another from above. Then both at once, answering each other in rhythm, tap, 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 tap. The plans, lifted in the air, one sheet at a time as if drawn by unseen fingers. The spiral lines tightened. The final turn of the staircase began to sketch itself across the page, an ending forming where none had been. I looked down. My shadow stretched longer than it should, reaching both down the stair and up through the ceiling beams, like it couldn't decide which direction belonged to me. The lantern flickered, guttered, and died. In the dark, the last echo whispered, not from above or below, but from inside the wall behind me. "Hold the line, son." The voice called me son again, not in anger or command this time, but with a brittle patience that came from somewhere between the stones. My father's tone, smoothed by echo. I pressed my hand against the wall. It was warm in pulses, as if blood ran just beneath the lime. "Dad?" Only the tower answered, a single heartbeat back through my palm. The lantern was gone, but the plans still glowed faintly on the table, the ink lines rearranging with every pulse. The spiral had finished its last turn now, forming not a flaw but an eye, center pupil dark, ringed by 22 perfect steps. I counted without meaning to. There was no 21. Behind me, the stair that led down was open again. Air moved there, slow, salty, the smell of the sea pushing against the draft from above. I started toward it and froze when the paper rustled by itself. The last page turned. Words bled through from beneath the spiral drawing, fresh, black, almost wet. "If the blood matches, the tower will close." My father had bled here. Maybe. That was what holding the line meant. Not endurance, but continuation. I wrapped my hand around the nail the old man had given me. Its chill bit deeper than before, as if it knew something I didn't. The first tap came from the floorboards above again, then two, then three, in quick succession. I tilted my light upward and saw between the beams a shape crawling head down, like a spider built from bones and tools. Nails protruded from its palms. Its eyes reflected brass. When it dropped, the air itself seemed to bend to make room. It hit the stone without a sound. When it stood upright, dust fell from its joints as though shaken from an old scaffold. It looked like my father, if he'd been drained of everything but work. The belt with the ring hung at its waist. New ropes sprouted from it, each disappearing into the ceiling. "You came to finish it," he said. "No," I said. "I came to end it." He smiled like an architect correcting a student. "Every end is a join." He reached to his side, drew a hammer that shouldn't have existed anymore, its head forged of something blacker than iron. "Hold your breath." "Dad, hold." The hammer rose and fell. Each strike hit not stone but air, yet sparks leapt from nowhere, and with every blow the wall behind me thickened. I felt the tower growing around us, the way a wound scabs. "You can stop," I said. "You built it wrong. It's killing." "It's keeping," he said softly. "We built it to stop the sea from taking everything. We just didn't know what it would ask in return." "What did it ask?" He raised the hammer again. "Us." The ropes around his waist twitched. One by one they slithered toward me, curling like vines seeking sunlight. I stepped back and hit the table. The top blueprint slid off, fluttering to the floor, landing face down. On its back, a child's handwriting crawled across the page. "Hold for me, Dad." I froze. "That's mine. I wrote that when you visited," he said, voice breaking for the first time. "You brought drawings. You said the tower looked sad." It remembered. But memories surfaced like a drowned thing gasping. A grey coast, my father's truck, the half-built cylinder, my small hand tracing chalk on the stone before being pulled away. The cold that day, the way he said, "Someday you'll finish what I started." My stomach turned. "It's using us. It's made of us," he whispered. "Now hold." The ropes lunged. I swung the nail like a blade, and it sang through the air, cutting one strand. The sound that followed wasn't rope snapping. It was a scream, deep and low, that rolled through the entire tower. The floor buckled. My father staggered, hammer clattering away. For the first time his form flickered, seams of light opening in his outline. "You broke the line," he rasped. "Now it will start again." I backed toward the stair. The walls pulsed faster, the glow turning white-hot. From every level below, hammering erupted. Hundreds of workers long dead, all in the same rhythm. "Tap, tap, tap, tap. Run," he said. His voice was no longer his own, but the tower's bending through him. "Run before it finds a new place." I ran. As I hit the stair, the glow collapsed into darkness, and the final sound before everything fell silent was a whisper brushing my shoulder, half pride, half warning. "You held well, son." The stair twisted beneath me like a spine, learning to breathe again. Each step flexed, settled, then flexed once more, alive in the way mountains shouldn't be. I kept the nail clenched in my fist so tight the head cut into my palm. The small pane anchored me against the larger one, closing in from all sides. Halfway down, the air thickened. My flashlight flickered once, twice, and went out. In its absence, faint light pulsed upward through the crack of each tread, heartbeats in reverse climbing toward me. Below, something shone. The workbench from the floor above, impossible in distance and position, glowing now as if submerged in milk. The tower had folded space again. It wanted me to loop forever. I gritted my teeth and pressed the nail's point into the mortar seam by my shoulder, scoring a shallow cross. "Remember this," I told myself. "Real direction only goes one way." When I moved again, the stairs resisted, the grain of stone sliding minutely under my boots like a conveyor belt running the wrong way. I forced each step until the pulse weakened. After a minute, maybe an hour, I reached another landing. This one was smaller, choked with tools fossilized in rust. Buckets of cement had turned to coral. A hard hat sat upside down in a pool of dried salt water. On the wall beside it, scrawled in soot, "The line holds, the man breaks." I pushed the door open. It wasn't a new room. It was the first one, the base level, the iron slab door still hanging crooked on its hinge. I'd returned to where I began, though the world outside had changed. The slits that once admitted daylight now showed only a horizon of static grey, as if the sea and the sky had fused into concrete. The path down the bluff was gone. In its place stood a single wooden post with a chain looped around it. A ledger identical to mine hung from a hook. Pages flapping though no wind stirred. I opened it, blank. Then one line at the top wrote itself slowly. Letter by trembling letter. Coates, held until released. My blood chilled. The ink bled downward, forming another name under it. Mallory, held until released. Then another. Hales, Corbett, until the page filled. The last space waited. The pen that had written them floated in the air above the parchment, tip hovering. "No," I said aloud. "Not this time." I stepped back toward the stair, but the tower wasn't finished. Behind me, the iron door groaned open wider than physics allowed. Wind roared through it, a gale from the sea, cold enough to burn. In the white rush of it came a figure, walking against the impossible current. It was my father again, but older now, older than death should have made him. His clothes were salt-stiff, his eyes hollow sockets of wind. He carried the black hammer in one hand, and its head dripped water that steamed where it fell. "You broke the line," he said, calm, tired. "The tower can't breathe without one. Let it die," I said. "You built a curse." He looked down at the nail in my fist. "Then end it properly." He held out the hammer. I didn't move. "Why give it to me?" "Because it still listens to our blood." He extended it further. "Drive the nail through your mark. Seal the spiral. It'll stop." The wind keened higher. The tower's walls vibrated, dust drifting from every seam. "If I do this," I said, "what happens to you?" "I'll rest," he said, and smiled faintly. "And you'll never come back." I took the hammer. It felt heavier than it should have, as if all the missing years had condensed inside its head. The nail gleamed, clean waiting. I knelt by the groove I'd carved in the mortar and set the tip there. The tower shuddered once, deep in its bones. From every stairwell and passage I heard voices. Mallory's, Hales's, men whose names I'd read only in dust. Each spoke the same phrase in different tones. Command, prayer, surrender, hold. "I'm not holding," I said, voice cracking. "I'm ending." I lifted the hammer. My father's eyes widened, not in fear, but relief. I swung. The impact exploded in light. A scream tore through the stone. Not mine, not his, but the tower's. The floor split underfoot. Heat rushed upward, a furnace breath. For a second, I thought I saw the spiral blueprint projected on the walls, every name blazing across its coils, burning away like fuse lines. Then silence. Dust fell in slow snow. The air smelled of iron and rain. When I opened my eyes, the door was gone. So was my father. The tower stood still. The only sound left was a drip, steady and patient from somewhere above, until the first tap, tap, tap. Tap began again, softer this time, coming from inside the nail I'd driven. For a long while, I thought the sound was only in my head, the echo of everything the tower had done to me. But the tap, 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 tap grew sharper, metal on metal, until I saw the nail itself trembling where I'd driven it. Tiny cracks spidered outward from the point like veins in glass. "Not again," I whispered. The hammer lay where I'd dropped it, still warm from the strike. I picked it up and held it close to the nail, half expecting to feel vibration through the handle. Nothing. The noise came from within. A faint light pulsed there too, the same sickly orange that had run through the mortar seams. I leaned closer, and a voice whispered through the vibration, faint but clear. "Line unbroken. Weight restored." The voice wasn't my father's. It was older, heavier, like something that had been buried speaking through dirt. I stumbled back. The pulse in the walls returned, stronger than before. My stomach turned. I'd sealed the spiral, yes, but instead of ending the tower's breath, I'd given it lungs again. From the floor, the ledger rustled open by itself. Pages turned in a wind that wasn't there until it stopped on a fresh sheet. New ink bled up from the fibers, forming letters I couldn't misread. Coates. Replaced. Replaced. I said aloud. The word echoed wrong, too close, like someone else's mouth had said it beside me. Above, the stair groaned. A shadow leaned into the circular opening at the top of the shaft. Human at first glance, until it bent wrong at the joints, as if made of hinges and scaffolding. The face was mine, but hollowed, thinner, more certain. The lips moved, but the voice came from the tower itself. You held too well. I backed away toward the wall. I destroyed you. You completed us. The shadow stepped down the stairs, each tread humming under its weight. My phone buzzed again. Against every instinct, I looked at the screen. One new voicemail. Unknown number. Timestamp 22. I played it static, then breathing. Then my own voice. Don't leave yet. You need to see it finished. I threw the phone. It hit the wall and died in a burst of glass. The shadow reached the floor and stopped an arm's length away. Its eyes were pits, but light flickered faintly inside them, the same orange pulse as the nail. You're not me, I said. You're what it made. We are both what it made, it answered. You just didn't know how deep the foundation goes. It reached out a hand that looked solid, but wasn't. The air rippled around it, like heat off steel. Touch it, it said. You'll understand. I lifted the hammer again. Stay back, the thing smiled. My smile twisted. There's nowhere back to stay. Behind it, the stair stretched higher now, higher than before, disappearing into a darkness that flickered faintly with light from above. The shadow turned its head upward. The roof is ready. The roof? I said. There is no... The 12th hour has passed, it interrupted. The line held. The splice completed. The roof builds itself. The tower rumbled. Dust rained from the ceiling. Through cracks in the beams, I saw a pale glow, not daylight, not moonlight, something older like reflection off wet stone far underground. It expanded, filling the shaft with light too white to be clean. The shadow began to climb. Every step it took sealed behind it, the stone growing solid, as if it were drawing the structure up from my own heartbeat. No! I shouted and ran after it. My boots hit steps that didn't exist seconds earlier. The tower rose faster than I could climb, but I kept moving. My lungs burned. The hammer grew heavier. By the time I reached the top, there was no ceiling anymore, only open air, a ring of unfinished parapet, and the ocean boiling below under a moon that shouldn't have been that close. The shadow stood at the edge, arms wide, waiting. This is the last line, it said. Once it closes, there will be no sea, no storm. Only the tower. I raised the hammer, breath tearing in my chest. Then it dies with me. The shadow smiled again. It already is you. And before I could swing, it stepped backward and vanished into the light where the roof should have been. For a moment, I stood alone at the top, hammer in hand, wind roaring like 1,000 breaths exhaled at once. The light, where the shadow had vanished, still hung in the air, trembling like liquid mercury. Then it began to pour upward, not down, twisting into a column that reached beyond sight. The unfinished tower was finally finishing itself. The parapet around me groaned, mortar bleeding bright orange before cooling into black stone. Every line the workers had once traced was now burning itself into existence. I felt the heat through my boots. The tower wasn't being built. It was being rewritten. I looked down. The ocean was gone. Only a vast grey plain stretched to the horizon, veined with dark cracks that pulsed in time with the tower's rhythm. The world below looked more like foundation than landscape. My chest tightened. I turned the hammer over in my hands, trying to decide what to destroy first. Then a familiar sound rose from beneath the new stone. Tap, 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 tap. The rhythm that had followed me through every floor. I dropped to my knees and pressed my ear to the cold surface. The sound came from below, but deep, impossibly deep. The tower's heart was awake again. When I lifted my head, a shape stood opposite me across the roof. It wasn't the shadow. It was a man in a worker's coat, face hidden under a cloth mask caked with lime. In his hands he held a plumb line, its brass weight swinging gently. "Who are you?" I shouted. He didn't answer. He knelt, pressed the line against the floor, and watched the weight settle. Then he nodded once, as if satisfied, and pointed to me with the free hand. His voice was quiet but carried through the wind. "Your turn." He set the plumb line down and stepped backward, dissolving into dust. The line stayed, perfectly vertical, vibrating faintly. The tower waited. I crawled toward it. When I touched the string, an electric tremor raced up my arm. Visions flickered, faces, tools, hands gripping stone. I saw the same names from the ledger, each burned into the tower's structure like fossils in amber. Hales Corbett, Mallory, and then my father, hammer in hand, smiling through exhaustion. "You don't have to finish it," I whispered, but the faces didn't vanish. They turned toward me one by one and opened their mouths. The words they formed were silent but perfectly understood. "If we stop, it falls." The plumb line jerked out of my hand, spinning in midair. The brass weight struck the floor. Tap. A single spark flared where it hit, followed by a widening crack that traced across the roof in a circle. The tower was marking its final seam. Wind tore at my clothes, whipping grit against my skin. The hammer pulsed in my grip, matching the beat of the plumb line. For the first time, I felt it pulling, not into the air, but downward, toward whatever the tower had buried beneath its foundation. Something inside me wanted to let it take me, to become the last nail that made the structure complete. I saw the logic of it, how the design had always needed a final name, one that matched the first. Coates. Maybe that was what Hiram had planned from the start, a circle of blood and stone that never ended. "No," I said. "No more." I swung the hammer at the plumb line. The weight exploded into molten dust, and the air itself screamed. The circle on the floor sealed in reverse, drawing the light inward instead of out. Everything tilted. The tower's rhythm faltered for the first time since I'd stepped inside. Then the world inverted. The sky fell like a curtain. The grey plain beneath cracked open, and from within came the sound of 1,000,000 nails being torn loose at once. The tower lurched, walls bending inward, then out, like lungs collapsing in panic. I dropped the hammer and crawled toward the center, desperate for balance. The nail I'd driven earlier lay embedded near the middle of the roof, still glowing faintly. Its pulse was slowing, irregular now, like a dying heartbeat. I pressed both hands to it. The metal burned, but I didn't let go. "End it," I said. "Please. Just end it." The nail stopped glowing, the wind cut off instantly, replaced by a silence that was too complete to be real. Then, from deep below, a single voice, faint, exhausted. Human rose through the stone. "Good. Hold." The tower exhaled one last time, and when I opened my eyes, I wasn't on the roof anymore. I was standing in the half-built chamber of the first floor again, blueprints spread before me, and someone behind me was saying, "All right, son. Let's start from the foundation." I didn't turn around. I knew that voice. It wasn't just familiar. It was present, alive, ordinary. The kind of voice you hear before breakfast, not in a nightmare. "Dad." Behind me, papers rustled, boots scuffed on stone. "Morning, kiddo," he said lightly. "We've got clear weather. Good day to work." I turned slowly. He stood there in a tan work jacket, the same one he wore in my childhood memories, sleeves rolled, hair damp with sea wind. Everything looked clean, unfinished, bright. The light through the tower windows wasn't grey anymore. It was morning blue. No cracks, no glow in the mortar, no pulsing walls, just a work site. On the table lay the blueprints, fresh, not brittle. Pencils, coffee mugs, a transistor radio playing static that resolved into faint folk music. He smiled, tired but warm. "You remember this place?" My throat locked. "I thought you were dead." He frowned like I'd said something strange. "Dead? You had a rough night, that's all." He poured coffee from a thermos, handed me a cup. Steam rose. The smell was real, bitter and earthy. For a second I almost believed it. The cup burned my hand, not with heat, but memory. The tower below the surface of things pressed against the edges of this new scene, testing it for cracks. I looked down. The nail still sat on the table beside the blueprints, gleaming faintly, though no one else seemed to notice. He followed my eyes. "Ah, you found Hiram's token. Old superstition. They say whoever drives the last nail finishes the curse." "Curse?" I asked. He laughed softly. He said curse. I say project. Depends on who's telling it. The radio stuttered, music slowing, reversing, then catching again. A voice, almost beneath the melody, whispered through the static, "Hold the line." Dad didn't react. He was humming along. "Dad," I said carefully, "what year is it?" He chuckled. "You hit your head harder than I thought." I checked my phone. No signal, no time, no battery icon. Just a blank screen that faintly reflected both of us. In that reflection, I wasn't standing beside him. I was behind him, watching. A ghost watching a worker. He rolled out a fresh sheet of blue paper. "We start the upper course today. When we finish the roof, she'll be perfect." "Dad, there's no roof," I said. "There never was." He didn't answer. He drew a line across the plan, ruler steady. The graphite squealed like metal grinding. A smear of orange light followed the pencil, bleeding across the paper. He didn't notice. My stomach knotted. I backed away until I hit the wall. The air thickened. The smell of coffee turned metallic. The light dimmed, color draining until only gray remained. He looked up. "You can't walk out before the splice," he said softly. "You remember what happens when someone leaves early?" "Where am I?" I whispered. "The same place you've always been," he said. "You just switch sides." He walked toward me, steps slow, hammer dangling loosely in his right hand. His eyes weren't warm anymore. They reflected orange veins pulsing beneath his skin. "Dad, please." "I tried to keep it off you," he said. "But the line needs blood that knows the name. Hiram started it, I kept it alive, and you—" He lifted the hammer. "You'll hold it better than both of us." The tower groaned. The scene around us peeled at the edges, paper curling in heat. Behind the bright morning, the grey world waited, patient and endless. I grabbed the nail from the table and backed toward the stair. The blueprints caught fire without flame. The radio screamed feedback. He raised the hammer. "Don't fight it. You're the last join." "Then let's end it together," I said, and threw the nail at his chest. It hit and passed straight through, embedding itself in the wall behind him. He froze. For a heartbeat, so did the tower. The hammer fell from his hand, clattering to the floor. His mouth opened, but no sound came out, only a breath of cold air that smelled like the sea. He smiled faintly. "You held long enough," and then he was gone, dust collapsing inward, leaving only his jacket crumpled on the floor. I picked up the hammer again, staring at the glowing hole the nail had left in the wall, because something inside it was moving, whispering my name, asking, "Do you want to see how it ends?" The hole in the wall pulsed like a heartbeat, trapped behind plaster. Every whisper from within came in rhythm with mine, as though the tower was sinking me to its lungs again. When I stepped closer, the light inside shifted from orange to white, blinding for a heartbeat. Then it showed a scene, flickering incomplete, like a film reel stuck between frames. Beyond the wall was not stone. It was memory. I saw Hiram first. His thin frame stooped over a table lit by lantern light. He wasn't alone. Men worked behind him, all in silence, their mouths moving but no sound escaping. Each one carried a rope, a nail, or a hammer. None looked up. Hiram turned, eyes wild, muttering words I couldn't hear until the light adjusted. He was speaking to the wall, speaking through it. "Line must hold," he said, "until the storm stops breathing." He struck the wall once with his hammer, and the image shook. When it cleared, the workers were gone. In their place, bodies braced against the stone, arms out, wrists nailed through. Each man held a section of the wall upright. The tower had been built around them. I stumbled backward, bile rising. The wall behind me pulsed faster, eager, alive. The whisper came again, closer now. "You see? They didn't build it. They became it." "No." I breathed. "No more." The voice sighed like the sea dragging across shingle. "Then finish it, Coates." The hammer grew warm in my hand, veins of light crawling across its head. The nail embedded in the wall trembled, inching outward like it wanted to be free. I grabbed it, tried to pull. It didn't budge. Instead, it turned slowly until its point faced me. A sound rolled through the tower. Not hammering this time, but a creaking inhale, as if the whole structure was drawing in air after drowning for a century. "Let me out," said the voice behind the wall. "Or take my place." "I can't." "You already did." The wall split down the middle, mortar bleeding white fire. From the crack, a hand reached through, grey, calloused, nails bent backward. It groped for me blindly, fingers closing around my wrist. I tried to pull away. The grip was iron. Then came another hand. Then a face, half-formed, peeling itself out of the wall like wet paper tearing free from glue. It was my father again, or what was left of him, face half stone, half flesh, eyes empty, but seeing everything. "You did good," he whispered. "Now hold." He pressed the nail into my palm. This time it burned cold, like ice so deep it blistered. He pushed my hand toward the wall, guiding me as though teaching a child to write. "Finish the line," he said. "It's the only way to stop it from starting again." "Will it stop you?" I asked. He smiled, pieces of plaster cracking from his cheek. "It'll stop us." I understood then. The tower wasn't alive because of ghosts. It was alive because it had no ending. Every generation that inherited it kept it breathing by refusing to die properly. It needed closure, a last line, a final builder. I looked into his hollow eyes. "Goodbye, Dad." I lifted the hammer. The walls around me screamed. Not sound, but pressure, a concussion of memories forcing themselves into my head. I saw every worker, every generation, every hand that ever held a nail. They were all watching, waiting. The hand on my wrist trembled. "Make it clean," my father said. I drove the nail into the wall. Light exploded outward. The floor cracked in perfect concentric circles, spinning like a clock's gears. The wall convulsed, sucking air, then finally exhaled. The tower shook once, then again, the rhythm slowing. Dust fell like snow, and for the first time since I'd arrived, there was silence. The hole sealed itself shut, the plaster smoothing over until only my own handprint remained. The hammer cooled. The glow in the mortar faded. I dropped to my knees, gasping, waiting for something else to happen, for a voice, a vibration, a sign that it wasn't over. But nothing came, only stillness. I crawled to the nearest slit window. The sea was back, grey, endless, calm. The world hadn't changed. The storm was gone. I laughed once, then twice, voice hoarse but free. Then from somewhere deep below, a faint rhythm began again, slow, patient, measured, tap. Tap, tap, tap. And beneath it, almost lost in the sound of the wind, a voice whispered, "Good, hold." The echo of that last tap. Tap, tap, tap rolled through the tower's bones, like a heartbeat trying to restart. I froze. The hammer slipped from my hand and clanged once on the floor. Flat, metallic, final. "Not again," I whispered, my voice trembling. The sound didn't stop. It kept coming, slow and steady, not mechanical but alive, as if someone far below was continuing a job I'd already finished. I forced myself to stand. Every muscle in my legs screamed. The air had changed again, thicker, damp with the salt of the sea, pushing in through cracks that shouldn't exist. The slit window beside me now showed waves smashing against the base of the cliff, closer than before. The tower was sinking. The walls moaned. Dust sifted from the ceiling in soft streams. Somewhere below, stone ground against stone like teeth gnashing. I staggered toward the stairwell, leaning on the wall for balance. The moment I touched it, I felt movement inside, like something beneath the surface was crawling, shifting to follow my hand. I jerked back. The mortar cracked in a perfect outline of my palm, glowing faintly white before fading again. "Don't," a voice murmured. I turned. Standing at the top of the stair was Mallory, the same gaunt foreman I'd seen in the upper levels, only clearer now. Flesh, not shadow. His face looked carved by exhaustion. "You finished the wall," he said quietly. "You gave it a breath. Now it'll drown." "I sealed it," I said. "I ended it." He shook his head. "You ended your part. The tower doesn't end, it resets. Every closure becomes foundation." The floor lurched, nearly throwing me off my feet. Water gushed from the seams, bubbling up through cracks that hadn't been there seconds ago. "The sea's inside," he said, voice barely audible over the roar. "You built the roof. Now it needs the flood." Lightning flashed outside the slit, so bright it painted the entire chamber white. For a moment I saw dozens of faces pressed into the walls. Workers, ancestors my father, all straining outward, mouths open as if gasping for air. Then darkness again. I stumbled backward toward the stairs. "I'm getting out!" Mallory's eyes dimmed. "There is no out. You're the keystone now. Pull yourself free and the rest collapses." He started down the steps, fading as he moved, his voice carrying after him like a thread unspooling. "Run if you must, Coates. But understand, you'll take the tower with you." The hammer at my feet twitched. I hesitated, then grabbed it. It felt heavier now, the handle slick with seawater. Each step down was a fight. The stairwell buckled and shifted, like the tower was breathing through water. Foam hissed at the edges of the walls. When I reached the next floor, the air was fog. Tables floated upside down, chairs drifted weightless. Pages from the ledger swirled like jellyfish around me. I tried to push through, the cold biting deep, the water climbing higher. At the center of the room, the wall I'd sealed glowed faintly, trembling as if something inside still moved. The nail shone again, but its light wasn't white this time. It was blue, the color of deep ocean. I swam closer. The glow reflected in the hammer's head, turning it into a mirror of the sea. Beneath that reflection, faces turned, mouths shaping the same word in perfect unison. "Hold." "No," I said, gripping the hammer. "I'm done holding." I raised it high and brought it down on the glowing nail. The impact thundered through water and stone alike. The light shattered into ripples, racing outward until the entire wall cracked open. Water exploded through the seams, roaring upward like a tidal breath finally released. The force threw me back, spinning, tumbling, until I hit the opposite wall. The sound changed, no longer hammering but breaking. The tower groaned one last time, and then everything went silent again. I kicked toward the surface, lungs burning, fingers grasping for air that might not exist. Above me, the roof of the tower blurred between stone and sky, and then, impossibly, I broke through. I was floating in open water. No tower, no cliff, just endless grey sea. I turned in the waves, gasping, and froze. Behind me, half submerged, rose a single nail the size of a spire, gleaming blue, and from deep beneath the surface came one final, rhythmic beat. Tap, 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 tap. The sound was slower now, like a dying heart, echoing across the water. Each tap rippled the sea, spreading circles of light across the waves. I floated there, numb, the cold biting through my bones, staring at that single colossal nail rising from the surface where the tower had been. It pulsed faintly blue, marking every beat like a lighthouse that had forgotten what to warn against. I tried to swim toward it. My limbs barely moved. Every motion felt heavier, as though the sea had thickened. The water pulled me, not down, but inward, toward the light. When I got closer, the glow grew warmer, hypnotic. Beneath the surface, I could see shapes moving, beams, stairs, doorways. The tower hadn't vanished. It had sunk, and kept building downward. The rhythm continued. Tap, 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 tap. It wasn't fading. It was counting. Something brushed my leg. Cold, solid. I kicked back and saw a figure rising from the depths. The same work jacket, the same motionless calm. "Dad," I whispered. He stopped just below the surface, water rippling above his face, his hair floating like smoke. His eyes opened, and for the first time, they weren't hollow. They were human, tired, even peaceful. "It's finished," he said. The sound wasn't a voice carried through air. It came from inside my chest. "You broke the line. Then why is it still here?" He looked up at the towering nail. "Because it remembers us. The work holds, even when the workers don't." The sea around him began to glow faintly. Other silhouettes appeared. Mallory, Hales, Corbett, dozens of them, all facing upward, arms outstretched, as if holding something invisible above their heads. The old crew, suspended in water and memory. "What happens now?" I asked. He smiled. Now it finally rests. The great nail began to sink. Slowly at first, then faster, twisting as it went, dragging the light with it. The blue faded into black. The water around me calmed, surface flattening until it reflected the sky like polished glass. I was alone again. No tower, no sound, just open sea and silence. I lay back, staring at the clouds overhead, grey, still, endless. For the first time there was no pulse beneath them. Maybe it was done. Maybe I drifted for what could have been minutes or years. My body gave up fighting. My eyes closed. The world went soft and dark. Then a dull clang, metal against metal. One more tap. My eyes shot open. The sky was darker now, tinted orange. The water around me had thickened again. Not sea, not air, but something in between. And above me, where clouds should have been, stretched an enormous circle of stone. I wasn't in the ocean anymore. I was beneath the tower, the view reversed. What I had thought was the surface was the floor. The tower had flipped. I was inside its reflection. All the walls around me were inverted, mortar lines glowing faintly white, names burned into each slab. Coates, Mallory, Hales, Corbett. Every generation. Every worker, every man who had ever held the line, I screamed. But the sound came out wrong, not echoing but hammering, as if the air itself struck nails into my voice. From the center of the ceiling, the great nail descended again, slow, deliberate, its tip aligned with my chest. The tower spoke, not as voices now, but as a single unified breath, stone and water vibrating together. Where the line holds, the world stands. I floated upward, helpless, drawn toward the descending nail. The light around me turned white-hot. I raised a hand, trying to shield my face, and realized the hammer was still in it. Black, wet, waiting. The handle was pulsing, matching my heart. One final choice. I could swing, break the line for good, and everything would fall. Or let it pierce me, and everything would stand forever. The tower didn't demand. It waited. I looked up one last time at the nail poised above me and thought of my father's last smile. Proud, relieved, human. I lifted the hammer. The hammer fell. The sea turned silent, and somewhere deep in the stone beneath all things, a rhythm began again. Softer now, steady, eternal. Tap. Tap, tap, tap what end of I inherited a haunted tower that was never finished.